Have we started?
Yeah.
Okay.
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 To bring this meeting of the Okinawa and Port Authority together for Wednesday, April 22nd at 6 p.m. Please stand for the invocation. Mr. Franklin.
Dear Lord, thank you for bringing us all together. Lord, thank you for everything you've done for us and be of this country, Lord, and the situation that's in right now, and be of this world too. Lord, help us do the right thing here, to push it out in poverty, Lord. Do the right thing for it. Thank you, Lord, for everything. In Jesus' holy name we pray.
Amen. Please join me in the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, Roseanne.
Give me a minute. Commissioner Hill?
Here.
Commissioner Franklin?
Here.
Commissioner Hannah?
Here.
Vice Chairman Cole?
Here.
He's on Zoom. Chairman Fullwood?
Present.
Thank you.
Are you gonna get him to speak through your microphone?
No, you could have him speak.
Well, it's
Through your
coming, both of us come through and it's kind of delayed here. But I can. still-
Yes, I can have him speak. But you need to mute your phone.
Okay. Got somebody zooming in.
All right, you hear me now?
Don't talk unless I ask you to. Okay. Roll call. Judy, you did that. No comments from the audience? For them?
No.
All right, we've got some speakers tonight. We're gonna get started with that. I'm gonna let Patrick introduce our first speaker, who is Whitney Gray. Would you-
Sure, thank you, Darren. So Whitney Gray is here from Michael Baker International. I've connected with Whitney and her partner Greg over there through ULI and some other things. Whitney's going to potentially speak at the Georgia Environmental Conference. So working on that. We were talking to Whitney about the resilience work and some of the grant funding and state programs, and she was involved in the state program. And so I just thought it would be a good idea for her to get in front of us, given that we have a port on the water and everything that's going on in Florida. And I don't want to steal any of her thunder, so I'm going to just let her take it away.
Welcome, Whitney.
Thank you all for having us tonight. I'm very honored to be here and tell you a little bit about a program I helped build and that I'm trying to continue to work with now that I'm in the private sector. What I want to do tonight is spend a few minutes telling you a little bit about how changing conditions are affecting the entire state of Florida, and try and pull in some specifics about how these conditions are affecting local governments and cities and counties and ports like yours, and then talk a little bit more about what kind of resources are available to deal with some of these issues. So just jump right in. This is an octopus. It's in the floor of a parking garage. It's floating in salt water in the floor of a parking garage on Miami Beach. This is not a normal situation in Miami. I know we're a long ways from Miami here, but it's still not normal. And what the Department of Environmental Protection began to see is situations like this arising more often. And so we started asking ourselves, how does an octopus get into a parking garage? This is a picture from the Miami Herald from several years ago during a king tide event. So I'm now going to show you and try to entertain you with one of my proudest accomplishments, which is this PowerPoint animation to illustrate how stormwater systems work and how they're not working in the state. So typically our stormwater systems work using gravity. And they were designed decades ago to drain water off of streets and parking lots out to the nearest body of water, which can be the Atlantic or the Gulf or many other kinds of bodies of water. And the outfall, which you see there at the water's edge, was situated above the high tide line, of course. That would make sense. But changing conditions in our world have resulted in sea level rise. And those outfalls are now frequently below high tide, and sometimes below even normal, not high tides. In fact, the department has funded several projects for cities like Tampa and St. Petersburg to make an assessment of the elevations of their stormwater outfalls because they're underwater. When your stormwater outfall is underwater, water seeks its own level, and that salt water comes up the pipe and sometimes flows right up into the street under severe conditions. That's how you get an octopus in the parking garage. What's even worse is that if it then rains, isn't this animation amazing? I've done a really good job of this. When it rains, the water can't drain. And so you wind up with homes and businesses and streets flooded and staying flooded for longer. So the state decided to try to get involved with this and deal with this. So what kind of conditions are we looking at? Over the last 100 years, tide gauges all around the state have measured increases in the average sea level. And you can see, these are the tide gauge charts from Fernandina Beach is actually up here on the upper right, and it kind of makes a U, a tour around the whole state. And you can see that over the decades going back to 1900 roughly, a varying amount of sea level rise. And these are actual measurements from tide gauges. The tide gauges measure the level of the ocean relative to the land that it's closest to. But starting back in 1992, NOAA and NASA actually put satellites into space, into orbit to measure sea level as well. So we know that over the last 100 years, there's been about a foot on average around the state of sea level rise. That means that your average sea level is 12 inches higher than it was 100 years ago. What's fascinating is that 5 inches of that, almost half of it, has occurred just since the year 2000. So just in the past 20 years. And the most recent reports from NOAA indicate that by 2050, in just 30 more years, we could have another 12 inches on top of what we already have. So the pace of sea level rise is increasing, and this is cause for some concern. Why is sea level rising? Well, our oceans are getting warmer, and there's some basic physics involved in the processes that make sea level get higher. One is thermal expansion. The diagram on the left I took from a plumber's website. Charles's law is basic physics. When water gets hotter, it takes up more room. And in an ocean, that means it encroaches on land. Another major contributor to sea level rise is glacial melting. This is the addition of new water from glaciers melting into the ocean. It's not the same thing as icebergs melting. When icebergs melt, they don't add to the volume of the ocean, just like melting ice in your glass doesn't add to the volume in the glass. But this is the addition of new water into the ocean. So these are two of the main drivers of sea level rise globally. There are other factors too, and some of them get very complicated. I learned recently that our polar ice caps on both the North and the South Pole are so massive that they have their own gravitational fields. And as they melt, those gravitational fields change, and that affects currents. If any of you are boaters, you may have heard recently that the Gulf Stream has slowed down. Changes to those gravitational fields, plus the water temperatures and salinities are affecting our currents. And when the Gulf Stream slows down, water actually kind of piles up on the East Coast. So all of these different forces are contributing to sea level rise. One thing that's mentioned in this diagram is subsidence, and that's when the earth, the ground, actually kind of sinks out from under you. This is more of a factor in other parts of, in the Gulf Coast, in the Louisiana and Texas area, and in some areas along the mid-Atlantic coast. And it's typically because of resource extraction, like water and oil, being pulled out of the ground actually just collapses. We kind of think of that in terms of sinkholes in Florida, but this is a more chronic issue. And in Louisiana, for example, they lose hundreds of yards of coastline from the southern edge every year, hundreds of yards. So when sea level rises, it causes lots of things to change. It may not sound like a lot, 6 inches here, or you might hear the figure 3 millimeters a year. Doesn't sound like very much. But every increase in that level of the ocean exacerbates other things. This animation, which I didn't make, actually shows how when you pile sea level rise on top of a storm or higher waves, you really change the profile of the beach and undermine the, for example, what's underneath homes, or exacerbate erosion and cause all of those processes to speed up. Storm surge is higher. Nuisance flooding becomes more frequent. Erosion happens faster. Sea level rise even drives saltwater intrusion, especially in South Florida, where the bedrock is more porous. Sea level rise is pushing a saltwater boundary inland, underground, and affecting some of their well fields. And of course, stormwater management, as we talked about. This is a video that I wanted to show you from the city of Hollywood, and it shows something that they've been dealing with. You heard me mention king tides. Notice that this is a fairly sunny day. This isn't a hurricane or anything, but the city realized that they were having a flooding issue in the neighborhood around this marina. And what you're seeing here is the water coming up the boat ramps, through the parking lot at some velocity and into the street here. Mark those houses sort of in your mind. And this next video shows a little later in the day. Notice that water is still flowing up the boat ramp. Naturally, they didn't design the marina this way. This is a condition that has changed over time. And look at those houses across the street now. Their yards, the street is completely inundated. There's salt water in the yards, and in some cases in the houses. DEP was able to provide some funding to help them address this. And the way they addressed it is called adaptation. When you change what you have to deal with new conditions. So they elevated the marina staging area and the boat ramps and the seawalls, and they brought it all up. They brought in fill and they just brought it all up. And now the neighborhood doesn't flood. I would hesitate to say ever, but not nearly as much.
What, was there any concern about the fill that you just talked about environmentally?
They would have had to comply with all the permitting requirements. That would have gone through lots of processes.
And they had seawall to begin with?
Yes, so it's the marina, so yes. I believe on the edges, they also did some more natural treatments too, something called living shorelines. And I'll talk a little bit more about that a little bit later. So when we talk about some of the solutions are policy solutions, and the state has tried to be very, they've tried to pick up the slack in the last 10 years or so, and they've put some pieces into place to help local communities deal with these changing conditions, particularly in the comprehensive planning process. So you see here some statutes, and it's a lot of blah, 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 but basically the state has given local governments some tools to deal with these issues. One there you can see on the right, adaptation action areas. That's an optional tool that you can put into your comprehensive plan that allows you to designate an area as a priority for funding. And you can draw a line around it on a map and say, this is a very flood prone area. Now it's going to continue to be in the future. And so we're going to make sure that we focus our attention on that area. And it helps in the state grant system. It helps to get you more points on grant applications when you have adaptation action areas. The Peril of Flood statute is more of a mandatory thing that was signed in 2015 that now requires coastal cities and counties to plan to do some analysis to see what current and future flooding risks they have and to make changes to their redevelopment plans so that you take people away from that peril of flood, trying to remove people away from dangerous areas. Most recently, in 2019, the slip study law was passed, and that requires state-funded coastal construction to be analyzed for sea level rise and flooding risk before construction starts. There's a pretty cool web tool that we created to help do this analysis and do this report, and it takes about 15 minutes, and your secretary can do it. It's super easy. But the biggest piece that's happened lately was in 2020, the Resilient Florida program came in. And this is a massive program that involves a lot of money, but also requires the state to do a statewide vulnerability assessment, flooding and sea level rise vulnerability assessment, and an action plan. But the biggest part about that I want to talk about is the money. But before we get to the money, when you're planning, what I want to just go very briefly through is how you plan for sea level rise, because a lot of people, you see the curves like this one and you think, well, you know, just give me the number. Just tell me what it's going to be and what I should build to. If I'm planning a new fire station, what elevation do I need it to be at? Just tell me. And so I just want to run through real briefly how you look at these kinds of curves. This is one that I made. There's a tool online from the Army Corps of Engineers that allows anybody to pick a tide gauge and a location. You can do it for Fernandina Beach, for example, and you see what the projections are for sea level rise into the future. The most recent research has shown that the very lowest one, and I don't mean the purple very lowest one, but the blue one, that's the low projection. And the very top one, the pink projection, is the extreme. Most recent research has shown that those two scenarios are not really very likely. The difference between these lines has to do with how much carbon dioxide is in the atmosphere, because that's really the driving force behind the warming. And it takes into consideration even different governance structures. So that blue line that I mentioned before, the low scenario, that's what would happen if everybody stopped all carbon emissions all over the world right now, which is, you know, basically impossible. The highest one is if everybody kept pumping out carbon dioxide exactly the same rate as they have now, and everything else that possibly could go wrong goes wrong. All the glaciers melt catastrophically all at once, boom. But again, not very likely. So what we try and focus on are the projections between high and the intermediate level. Those are in the more realistic range. There's more uncertainty as you go out in time. So as you think through how you use these curves, you do have to factor in some of this uncertainty. So how do you do that? Well, the reason that you do this is to figure out how to site your infrastructure. So, and that depends on how much tolerance for risk you have for that particular piece of infrastructure. And I like to use some examples that are kind of extremes. So if, for example, we were building a nuclear power plant, we're not going to have a lot of tolerance for risk. If it fails, if it gets flooded and fails, it affects millions of people. It has other horrible consequences. We want to plan for a worst case scenario. So we might use a higher sea level rise projection to find the elevation to site that nuclear power plant. If, on the other hand, we're building a beach parking lot, we have a lot more tolerance for risk in that case. It's not as big an investment. People don't suffer. There's not, interruptions of critical services, etc. So you can plan for a lower amount of sea level rise, a more likely scenario, but you can absorb more risk. So that's how you use these curves to sort of figure out how you're going to plan your infrastructure. But it takes some thought. There's not necessarily a formula that's cut and dry where you can just say, there's the number. And many local governments are using this now, taking this into account when they are planning infrastructure. Pinellas County, for example, has devised a tool. It started as an elaborate Excel worksheet that their public works department uses when they're considering any capital project over $1 million. They look at the useful lifespan of that piece of infrastructure and figure out where sea level rise may be at that point in time to determine whether or not that bridge or road will be underwater. And then they make different decisions. They change the design or the location to accommodate them.
Is that resource publicly available so that you can adapt it for your local conditions?
They have that available just to staff. I have the original resource that they use, the Excel spreadsheet. They turn it into a fancy schmancy web tool now. But I can hook you up with the Public Works Director in Pinellas County who can tell you all about it because she devised it. It's not all about the coast, of course. There are other things that are changing, like our rainfall patterns, and you all probably have noticed this yourselves. So we have a lot more rain, and it's happening in weirder ways. We have wetter wets and drier dries. It's kind of interesting. Rainfall is really, really hard to project into the future. Sea level rise is really measurable. There's some very concrete things that scientists can model and project out. Rainfall has so many varied factors that it's really tough to determine how it's going to change over time. But what we do know is that scientists don't think that our overall state average rainfall of about 54 inches a year is going to change drastically over the next 50 years. It's happening already in different patterns though. When I was a kid, maybe some of you all remember this too, it was a 3 o'clock, I grew up in Clearwater, it was a 3 o'clock rain shower, thunderstorm every afternoon in the summer. You can count on that, set your watch by it. Rain now is falling in harder, faster, briefer events that fill up the streets like the picture in Stanford there and overwhelm stormwater systems. And then we have longer spaces, longer intervals in between the wet season and the dry season. The picture on the right I threw in there because it's not just Florida that's affected by this. That was Philadelphia. And those cars are not in a river. They are parked on the street or in a parking lot. And that's what Hurricane Ida did in Philadelphia. I don't have in my memory hurricanes in Pennsylvania. So these are some kind of new things that are happening. As I said, rainfall is hard to project. There's a lot of words that don't mean anything except that there's some studies going on to try and get a better grip on that. The state rainfall, in the state, rainfall projections are usually made by water management districts, but they only use historical trends and they only look out about 10 years. So there's some good research going on now to try and refine that.
For several years, I kept a log of the rainfall in the areas I live. And when you put it side by side, you know, it's really amazing. You know, June the 6th it rained, you know, June the 10th it rained. And it's pretty interesting. When you talk about the water rising, the water management people have changed the flood zone areas in this county already. They've come up about 6-8 feet or whatever.
Yeah, there's FEMA and other agencies are really having to reconsider how they determine those flood zones. FEMA historically has not considered sea level rise. And so a lot of locations typically contest their firms because their flood insurance rate maps because they don't feel like they're accurately portraying the risk. So let's get to what's really relevant. How do ports figure into resiliency? So we know that ports are highly important to Florida's economy, and what gets disrupted at a port affects everybody in the state and elsewhere because of all the lack of fuel and other interruptions, the lack of movement of freight and all those kinds of things. And ports play a huge role in post-disaster recovery. So having ports viable as much as possible, even in bad conditions, is really important. We talk about different kinds of disruptions, short-term shocks, like a hurricane. We can plan for those. We've done a pretty good job of preparing for hurricanes. The long-term stressors, like this slowly creeping sea level rise, has been a little bit tougher to get our heads around. But there is some guidance out there. The Florida Ports Council released a report in 2019 all about resilience. And it talks about the status of port resilience right now and makes some suggestions on what to do to deal with it. Can we really just throw money at this problem and make it go away? Well, we can't make it go away, but we can make some improvements so the money doesn't hurt. And so now I want to tell you a little bit about the grants that are available. There are two kind of buckets of money for the Resilient Florida grants. One is for planning, that's like studies, vulnerability assessments, and doing kind of the background data collection for knowing what the vulnerabilities are. These grants are open to counties and municipalities, but that doesn't mean that a port can be left out of that. I mean, you can definitely partner with the city of Fernandina Beach or with Nassau County to get grants like this, to do analyses for what your vulnerabilities are. The state has set aside $20 million. And this is all part of this statute. That's a statutory amount that's called for in the law, $20 million for these planning studies. And the state is very committed to making sure that every city and county in the state does a vulnerability assessment, whether they're coastal or inland. So these funds are very available. The application this year for the planning grants opens on May 1st and closes on May 31st. But I think possibly, oh, and there's no match required for the planning grants. The infrastructure grants may be of more interest to you. And because these are open to more entities than just counties and cities. But I will say that the special districts that are considered eligible to apply for these grants have to be dependent districts. And I understand that your port authority is not a dependent district. Right. So, but again, partnering with your local city and counties, with Nassau County or with Fernandina Beach, is definitely a viable option. Both Nassau County and the city of Fernandina Beach have gotten numerous grants from DEP to do resilience work. So I know that I've talked many times with Lorelei Jacobs over at the city of Fernandina Beach. She's very well versed in this program and does a great job with those projects. So I think that even though you might not be directly eligible, you can definitely find a partner nearby to help you with this. These projects, this bucket of money is more money. I have 180 million on there, but that's low. It's somewhere between $200 and $400 million available for these capital projects. And projects can be anything that helps you deal with current or future flooding. Stormwater systems, seawalls, erosion control projects, pump stations, elevation of critical assets. So like some grants have been given out to elevate control panels, electrical control panels, for example, all kinds of projects like that that anticipate higher water levels, either for a short period of time or an extended period of time. There is a 50% match on these grants, and it has to be a non-state match because this is state money. So you have to find other different entities have used bond funds or a federal grant that they got. The application opens on July 1st and has a bit of a bigger window, closes on September 1st. These grants, both the planning and the infrastructure grants, have a really long fuse. Once they're awarded, you have about 18 months to get a fully executed contract, and then up to 3 years to complete the project. So there's plenty of time, and you can apply in a subsequent year for another project. And I want to emphasize that the state, go back to this, the state is very eager to give this money out to improve the resilience all around the state. And so the applications are not overly complex, and a lot of different kinds of projects are eligible. So keep that in mind. As I said previously, seaports need to be a dependent entity, but in the update to the bill this year that just passed in this year's legislative session, they specifically called out several different kinds of entities, including seaports, as eligible. One other requirement is that the project that you want to get funded needs to have been identified on some kind of plan or analysis that's been done. If there is a stormwater master plan or a basin study or something like that that indicates that the area that you're targeting is flood prone now and will continue to be, that needs to be pointed out. And importantly, there are some projects that are absolutely not eligible. So anything that is for navigation, for example. The state did fund a couple of dredging projects, but those were dredging to increase the capacity of canals that are drainage canals. Aesthetics, recreation, and interestingly, water quality. Water quality improvements are off the table. So they're happy to get water quality improvements from whatever resilience project you do, but they're not going to pay for specific water quality aspects of the project. Here's some examples of projects that have been funded: erosion control and stormwater systems, facility improvements. We talked a little bit about this. The photos on the right show a couple of kind of a before and after of a project that my company did along the edge of the Merritt Island Airport runway, which extends out into the Banana River. And so you see, this is kind of what we call a hybrid living shoreline. You can see the cement blocks with the holes in them that interlock. That helps reduce the erosion along that shoreline. And then the grasses that are planted there and then that continue to grow and recruit further hold on to all the sand that accumulates in there into the blocks. So that's what we call a hybrid living shoreline. It's kind of an example of nature-based infrastructure that the department really likes to see. I've got a few resources here for you. And I know that Rosanna will distribute the presentation so you can use these live links. There's so much activity going on in the state right now. In this area, and I'm not sure if Nassau County is involved in this, but I know there is a Northeast Florida regional resilience entity that is being pulled together. And, you know, entities like this, when local governments band together, they really can leverage their political power and influence to get laws passed that help them deal with these issues. The Adaptation Action Area law that we talked about early in the presentation, that's a direct result from the Southeast Florida Climate Change Compact, and then those 4 counties banding together and demanding that the state take some action to help them deal with these issues. So these are some, and I put the Florida Port Council on there too, and a couple of other resources on this last page. NOAA Sea Level Rise Viewer is a really interesting online tool where you can really get a visualization of how far a small amount of sea level rise kind of encroaches onto the land. It shows you a little bit about how wet things get as a foot or 2 feet of sea level rise emerges onto the land. And with that, I'll thank you so much for your attention and be happy to answer any other questions.
Thank you, Whitney. That's very impressive. I know we're probably going to take advantage of some of the things you talked about. Have you done any other presentations locally here?
No, sir, not locally. Let's see. When I was with DEP, I was doing about 100 presentations a year. And I do remember that my last trip before COVID shut everything down was to Fernandina and to come and see Lorelei and talk with them. So I have been in this area talking about it and checking on projects, but I haven't given another presentation, especially not recently.
I think there may be a couple of government entities here in Nassau County that would be very interested in your presentation. And I'm sure they may be in contact with you. We've got a city commissioner sitting in the back there. And I know he's taking notes and he may want you to come talk to them. So make sure you get him a card and who wants to contact. Any questions about anything?
What would be the benefit to a city or county to partner with them?
Well, I think the main benefit really kind of goes back to an economic development benefit that directly affects their city. I mean, the port talked about some of the impacts of, you know, when a port is damaged or unable to function, I think the primary loser in that is the city or the county. There are a couple of reports, one is very recent, that talk about the economic benefit of working for resilience, of doing some of these projects. And there are studies called The Cost of Doing Nothing that illustrate what can happen, what you stand to lose when you don't take these actions. So I think some of the information like that could be leveraged to help you make your case.
So the city of Fernandina Beach is looking at their shoreline along the river. And I have gone back and forth with some folks at the city about the port property and how that would tie in, because as you said, water seeks its level. And so what's the plan for the stormwater? You know, we have a stormwater system that does flow into the river. And so I think it does make sense to partner, but I'm questioning for these specific grants, how we could do that for OPA property. If ultimately, usually with the grant, they will not invest in infrastructure that the applicant doesn't own in the end. And so how would we take advantage of that when we aren't a dependent district?
I'd have to look into that a little bit. I mean, you're right, typically these grant funds need to be expended on public property, so that would kind of depend. I'll confess, not knowing all the details about how the port operates, but there are answers to those questions. I can help you research that.
What do you I can really help you.
Yeah, come on up to the microphone.
I appreciate it. My name is Gregory Kern. I'm a program manager with Michael Baker and work closely with Winnie Gray. So thanks for giving me the opportunity to answer your question. So relevant to City of Fernandina Beach and the work that you all are doing in concert with the port. With your definition of your CIP, with the definition of your master plan, you do have the ability to kind of have preloaded, pre-approved projects that meet kind of the test, if you will, within the grant to have an identified project, where the City of Fernandina Beach and others may not. They may have only had the vulnerability assessment, or they may be in the early stages of the project, identification themselves. So by partnering with your organization, you essentially have the opportunity to kind of help them kind of advance in time and begin to execute and access the Resilient Florida funds earlier than if they could do it themselves. The other thing that Whitney, has highlighted so eloquently here tonight is it's kind of one of those things where you guys are right next to the City of Fernandina Beach. We all come, either are residents here or come to visit with our families. Fully understand, that Fernandina Beach, the marina, the river, your complex and others are all very integrated and connected to one another. So, the collaboration and coordination that you can bring in conjunction with the beach communities and the county certainly is something that will, be widely celebrated and engaged from a community standpoint. But to answer your question directly, I think there's a lot of kind of give and take on what you have in your plans, they have in their plans. You have a harder plan that has a little bit more structure to it as a port organization than the city entities do. And I think Whitney and our staff here at Michael Baker can kind of help navigate that. That was kind of the initial discussion that we had with Patrick as I was, seeking to kind of introduce Whitney to this group, was that there's a lot of benefit here. City of St. Augustine did a similar type of thing. City of St. Augustine has received a lot of funds in this particular area. The project that she presented, the Merritt Island Airport Authority project, was that I represent that client as well. And that was a project that was done in partnership with Brevard County. So it was an identified CIP project. It was done in partnership with the county to improve some of the resiliency of the airfield itself, and it became an award-winning project within the state of Florida. And is a key project that is kind of spearheaded nationwide within the airport community and nationwide as a resiliency application. So I believe that you have an opportunity to do something similar, hence why we wanted to introduce Whitney to you all. I appreciate you giving me an opportunity to share.
Thank you very much.
Is there an upfront investment that's required to retain your firm?
So we certainly, we are a fee-based, private consulting firm. So we would certainly, be interested in talking with you about our fee structure and how we could support you in an official capacity to essentially, do consulting services for grant application and grant opportunity. That said, we have relationships with many of the organizations that I've just mentioned, with Nassau County, Bernardino Beach, and others. We're here in part to ensure that the vibrant communities that we all live and work and enjoy, are here for our children. I have 3 small kids, ages 2 to 9. I want to make sure that they have someplace cool to come to on the weekend and enjoy the waterfront.
I think that everyone on this board is very supportive of the cause and the use case. It's just how to coordinate with the different government entities, which, as you know, is. But if there was a way that we could support a project pending approval of the ultimate award of the grant and our participation, considering that we are currently directly eligible. I think that could be something.
And that's certainly something that Whitney and I are exploring with a multitude of agencies and entities from West Palm Beach and the Keys all the way here to Bernardino. I think it's a common problem, but it's something that we're working together. And I think Whitney is very humble in talking about her background. She is the architect of this program. She helped create this for FTP. She can certainly help us work with interested parties within our network to find ways to maximize it.
We are in the process.
Of
doing our new
master plan for the port. And I'm going to suggest they look into your offering and make contact with you and see if there's anything they can put in our master plan that would help.
I can definitely make some suggestions.
To get that. Okay, good. We'll have them
And Chairman,
contact.
we certainly would love that opportunity. Is it RSNH that is doing it? So, we've worked closely with them in other capacity in the airport industry and others. So we'd love to find a way to support their efforts and then by proxy, support your success.
I'm sure they'll be in contact.
Any other questions?
Any questions?
Mike, do you have any questions?
No.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you so much for coming. And
I'm sure some people.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and I look forward to talking.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Very good. Very good. Good way to start.
I've moved something up.
Okay.
On the agenda.
I've moved something up on the agenda. I want to go ahead and get it out of the way. But I want to go ahead and get it done. And that is the interviews for the executive director position. And we have 2 candidates here tonight. And I'm going to ask them to come to the microphone and speak. And when you do, I'm going to ask the other candidate just to step outside because I don't want one to influence the other or vice versa. So I think that's the proper thing to do. And so we'll do that. So the first candidate I'm going to ask to come up is it Noel? Come on. All right, would you please approach the microphone, and David, if you'd step outside. Give us your information, name, address, and where you live, and you're going to probably do that in the presentation.
My name is Noel Como. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I've been a port maritime freight planner for 25 years with some experience in urban planning, as well as having worked in the Department of Defense work, for example, or even mentioning the funding earlier.
Microphone.
Thank you, sorry.
That's
What I was mentioning is that I've worked with federal funding, I've worked with the Maritime Administration, on some of that and some administration earlier to Greg and Whitney. Knowing about, for example, FEMA has a mitigation program and other potential mitigation programs that would complement Florida funding, for example. So I've dealt in a lot of different capacities. So I started at Port of New Orleans originally. Jumped over to the private sector with companies, I kind of say this to about the companies I've worked for, become 80 comps, kind of required everybody in the state of the tribe. URS, to French Car Harris. I have worked in almost, to some degree, every capacity of port planning, except the engineering, the actual design. Despite what one ex-girlfriend once told me that I'm sort of like an engineer because my ex-girlfriend once told me to understand like design. So I started out, for example, doing a lot of the economics. Doing the economic projections, Port of New Orleans and economic for a long time back in late '99 had one Saturday. Container train was closer to the mouth of the Mississippi. Container train, and that was one of my first bigger projects, having done that application. In that case, done economic projections for that. In that case, today, to some degree, Louisiana is still building. To some degree, Louisiana is still building. More recently, we kind of jump ahead. Last year, I was working at a group called Metro Analytics. Metro Analytics, a lot of the infrastructure is affiliates, instead of being a 4-year affiliate. And what I'm getting at is that near and dear to my heart is kind of near short-sea shipping. Highways help start that program, for example. Highways, before we call it, for example, even before we call it highways, that short-sea shipping. So I do about all the different services. What I'm getting at is what I'm getting at Metro Analytics last year, work my primary focus, Kentucky group was the Kentucky group now, which is being working on the different aspects of that, Mississippi River and the Mississippi River and the services, knowing what happens today, then how that all comes from the north versus but knowing how the knowing how we want to just build it, they just come, they will come, just think something happens, a great idea. But truly make those services work. You're talking about transferring goods. One of my colleagues who came into the American administration while I was there came from an ED background, so he was still in the industry. And what I was getting at is that he was talking about it's a great idea of moving goods across Lake Michigan. Well, that sounds great, but it made no sense. It doesn't make sense because every time you touch the box, every time you touch the box, it's about your cost. So in contrast, put it on the trucks. That being said, in contrast, one of the few internal analyses that MARAD was looking at the feasibility of transportation for goods moving from Long Beach to San Diego. For goods moving completely feasible, completely makes sense. The reason completely feasible, completely makes sense. Los Angeles, Long Beach really has no interest in a short sea service. So it made sense for the numbers. It made sense for the business point of view. Understand the business, but in the end, it has not happened today. It has not. So going back to the funding that when I was with the Maritime Administration, I was fortunate enough to as they call it, signed up providing the transportation expectations. That's the website. NCMDCM.gov. What I was tasked with is what I reported to permanent DD yourself from engineers. It says, well, you have the opportunity to sink yourself or sink or swim. What I'm getting at is develop what's called the Federal Funding and Marine Transportation System. That was the first one that was developed. Got all the accolades from U.S. Transit. I was asked to update that, which I did. The key trick to that, by the way, is that you say you can just read this information on grants.gov. The key issue that is one reason you don't see this normally in the government is because nobody takes responsibility for somebody else's program. So the key issue for us being a multi-agency collaborative and getting to work with all the agencies is one of the things that the NTS. So simply the fact that I could verify the information. So the first camera, for example, I believe was around 53 programs with a roughly 86% confirmation rate. So what I have to every program in show them the format we're going to use. Does this sound good? Yeah, that is the same information. Including federal highway programs, for example. And then the same went with the second federal funding through 86 ironic confirmation ratio, a higher confirmation ratio. Well, and then they subsequently have continued that federal funding in sense, which is is, long story short, telling you about the ability of the program, or the authorization of that program, on a side note, it does not include the new BIL funding, but because of the timing of it. So what I'm getting at is that I'm familiar with the funding process. I myself currently through the contract for grant applications. And it's knowing, especially having been inside, as we call it, and working for USDOT, reviewing entire grant applications originally, having the benefit to go through that process. So while you can read a grant application, say, hey, this sounds great, or the benefit cost analysis makes sense, I myself have found that there's a lot of people don't understand numbers, benefit cost analyses, myself, very good at my original data skills, but also having worked in science, knowing how to word things for the most part, and what sells people, right? Because even the original, the Title I program actually did not have a BCA component to it. And if you go back and look at the history of them, the initial Tigers actually did not have the criteria for even initial use of those grant applications or grant funding opportunities throughout the United States. So USDOT has been learning along the way for the most part. So I hope that gives you a fair idea. A final note is having been in the Florida market, having been a DC recently in the Florida market for about 3 years now. Got very familiar, of course, with that, familiar with how Florida works and the market here. But some of that is having the opportunity, which I was very fortunate to work on the freight ability and trade study, the FMT, trade plan FMTP, as well as the statewide shark parking study, excuse me, as well. And then unfortunately, that is, Justin Ryan went over to Jacksburg. That having an opportunity to work with Justin relative to the District 2 truck parking stuff. So the one they finally published was mostly me completing at the time. So I don't think that gives you a fair long-winded idea.
Thank you. Questions?
So one of the issues that has been discussed before is the M95 grant, which you brought up in your cover letter for funding for. We haven't yet been able to get barge service off the ground. Factors outside of our control. Factors outside of our control. What would be your suggestion? And so, what would be your suggestion in this role?
One thing I've been curious about myself is one thing I've been know exactly what you're talking about is grant applications out there online, but the grant application is not there online. I'm not sure what, for example, from the county support. For example, so the idea what I'm getting at is so apply for the grant. The idea dealing with the issue, apply for the reports. NARAD, Bob Bouchard's office, kind of asking, well, NARAD, where's your reports? Where's the handling point? They were very good at managing that and very good at that process, which is important. So number one is working with them and just fixing the issue, I guess, from an administrative fixing the issue, I want to say from an administrative point of view and getting up to speed. Second is see if there's any way that the funding can be corrected in any way. It still has to be related to what was asked for. So they're not asking for the money back. So they're not asking for the money back. And it is possible they don't want to, of course. They don't want to, of course. They want part they have, for example, part they asked to help answer the question. Designated projects. Right now, they not designate Perry service. But they've actually denied that. They've actually seen market to the Perry service there. Going back to the question is besides the administrative side is looking at all potential when I say potential solutions. What's kind of about the Green Highway program? While I was there, our focus in the program was typically covered in the United States, and then they expanded that mostly for the benefit of what that meant. But that also covers the Caribbean. And I know as Chris pointed out at meetings that one of the issues business here potentially through service Jack obviously that to a big extent. So even though there's a specific grant from here coastline, what about the idea of the money staying and somehow working that to service?
A barge service to the Caribbean. Okay.
Right now, we're part of a number of years ago. So we've been working with Bobby Shard and David and Mike to whenever there's a highway designation. Those people, infrastructure program, which is by close, but when getting at, they're so good at what they do that Merida, even if it's designated a marine highway, even if it's designated under Tim highway, then it's moved over to Vincent now. It's moved from a management point of view of the money. It's now moved over to the money.
When we first did this.
When we first did this, we were expecting ports up the coast to be involved. What is the reason they're not being involved in this program?
Mark Young was one service. Mark Young, he had a design. He had, and the long story short of it is that you can, a lot of the fact that trucks go on the 95 corridor, the fact that there just isn't the demand for it, I guess you'd say. There just isn't putting a ship and on a bar, even a ship that stays on the bar, on the coastline, that stays. It's so much easier to put things on truck. It's so much faster, even though it's one container at a time. The logistics involved in moving the logistics involved in multiple containers, on an ocean going barge, multiple goes barge. On an ocean example, when BPA first proposed the Richmond the initial moves back and forth up and down the initial, a lot of those containers were up and down the river. A lot of those, they were simply being put on the ship to keep the news from picking on the service. The reason that service got started and continued, but the reason that service one of the programs that helps fund operational money is the congestion mitigation air quality program. If you're in a non-attainment area, you have to be in the non-attainment area. So they were able to get that money. CMAQ funds operational money. PIDP, the current the other programs that are currently out there, those are not operational monies. Those are not infrastructure. So they were able to leverage CMAQ. And so they were able to put the other side note is only Albany service running. Albany or New York, it only existed for a couple of years because it survived on CMAQ. And then once the CMAQ money ran out, it couldn't stay viable.
So you're saying going north is
north or south,
not feasible now?
Nobody ever seems to be interested in it. If you really, I know at one point when I was there, Lauren Brand was our SES, and she was touting our relocation. That's not quite a marine highway service. The idea is you have cargo. It's not quite a marine. So it's a matter of working with your sister port or partner port in this case. So it's a matter of is there demand there? You have to relocate cargo, or can we do this? And obviously they look at it from a per box point of view or per box cost, right? You do have the public benefits of trucking emissions and those factors that play into your grant application. But keep in mind, somebody could start the service anyway. They don't need public support, right? They don't need that necessarily behind them. They can just go start the service and start running it tomorrow. So you have to ask yourself, why is it my SES? Going back to the first example I gave, Mark Young, Mark's looked at it himself and came up with a lot of ideas. They were looking for government money to start the service. The trick, of course, with government money is you got to check government boxes, right? You got to go to support, you have to do everything just to stay alive. And all I'm getting at is that has never happened to this day. But you do see some services run in different places. There's other things you tell them to go to different places. There's other things you say there may be a market for the Caribbean.
But you say
there is a market
for the Caribbean.
No, there's probably a market for the Caribbean.
We partner with someone.
There's Jacksonville takes advantage of it. It's a matter of if you go to Jacksonville, taking away part of that market, it's a matter of growth. Is it a bar service in the market unless they market?
Is it a bar service in Jacksonville? No. Short sea shipping. Yeah, it's hard to say. Yeah.
Kind of a loaded question.
It's kind of a loaded question because we have historically had an issue with a tugboat being affordable and accessible to our ports. One of the complaints from our customers is that the tug service is expensive, and that was because they were coming from Jacksonville. And so the tug that we have has some
for the port, but we have had questions about whether or not that was a permissible use. and whether or not we could, figure out how to modify that grant. So that we could, continue that use compliance.
And if I'm understanding your sort of indirect question, that is, that yes, if Barron agrees to it, then you could redirect it and use the tug relative to doing an ocean going barge and pulling it across the Gulf Coast. Up to past the Bahamas and so on and so forth. It's interesting how much what's happened in the Caribbean and what's not happened, because the Chinese were talking about developing their own terminal and then they gave up on it.
Okay, any other questions?
How did you find out about the position?
I'm online, but because I'm pretty well networked in around the country, and with different grant applications and things, that a friend of mine actually out of Chicago, Minneapolis, and that Northwest area pointed it out to me. Not to drop names, Libby Ogard, who's been around this industry for a while, pointed it out to me. To also kind of answer one of the other questions, probably in the back of your head, is that the answer, I guess, the question, I guess, that would be why, right? And the answer is I like helping small communities. I like helping and making a difference. My original reasoning for getting into planning in the beginning, when I could have chosen anything else, I had finished my public policy undergraduate, went back to my master's. I chose urban planning because I believe in jobs. I believe in creating jobs. That's my own personal focus. It has stayed my focus since day one. I leveraged that originally with a lot of my economics from the undergraduate days in terms of developing grant applications. I worked for the Orleans. They had their own state program, Louisiana Port Priority Program for funding, and helped do the economic projections in BCA for that for the most part. Ironically, just to give you an idea of how much funding that is already important. Currently, the Commonwealth of Kentucky, their current port program annually is $500,000 total to all 8 operating ports. They're hopefully going to fix that in 2 years, probably have to wait now for the next money legislation. But a lot of programs around the country, like Florida has the STIP and so on and so forth, Louisiana and other programs, it is, as you already know, very vital to create the economic opportunity in the community. And I know, for example, from talking to different people around the city, that, and people who've worked here before, worked in Oregon, that those people mention how the port can be a crux to the community, right? But going back to the funding issue, is EPA has programs now that work with the neighboring communities, not only for funding, but for solutions. So there's a lot of resources out there that I like to know that are there. I'm going to happy to have had the opportunity to work with the federal government and knowing what resources are out there. But what I'm also getting at is, going back to the original answer, is that focus from creating the jobs, creating the infill to development. The final note is I see the opportunity that Jacksonville as a whole has in Florida. Seeing that there's businesses that are vacant that could be filled in. It's the largest geographic city in the country. There's a lot of opportunity here. The fact that Jacksport has now surpassed Miami for container volume says a lot. This area is an ideal location with Amazon. Work I've done in Lee County and having talked to Amazon, I'm very good at cold calls, by the way. Talking to Amazon and Walmart and knowing how their distribution networks work, that goods are coming all the way from Jacksonville through Orlando down to Lee County, Lee County, New York, for example. So knowing that Jacksonville is an ideal spot, and you're not hindered by one railroad FECRR, for example, but you can leverage CSX at that point.
Okay, we're looking for an executive director, and you would answer to the board.
Yes.
Strictly to the board, and work with Chris. We're also concerned with economic development in Nassau County. How could you help us with economic development as far as OPA itself, not addressing the port, just OPA in the county and economic development? How could you help us with that?
It would be working with the different agencies, the Chamber of Commerce, and looking at opportunities. You also have, of course, surrounding businesses to a port. You have training programs to help leverage skill sets. We're seeing an economy that's going to keep growing for the next year. They don't anticipate, I say they, the experts and colleagues I have with Standard & Poor's do not anticipate a slowdown until next year. Hopefully we'll soften that landing with interest rates, get ahead of the game. So we'll be working with those agencies to look at opportunities that help grow the area, that help create jobs. I've seen a lot of things I've seen a lot of studies that talk about creating jobs. I've developed studies in the past myself. I've seen ones that are kind of on paper, right? And what I'm getting at, sir, is that it's a matter of really creating those jobs, creating opportunities for younger people, people that may not go to college, for example, and want to work in the port. If not, they may just want the businesses that help support the port. It could be the banks that support the port. It could be anything that's related to that community. The community is all intimately tied to one another. All the implications in it.
If you've studied our port at all, you know that we have a trucking problem. How would you help us solve the trucking problem? What would you recommend us? We talked about queuing trucks to come in at a certain time. The access we have into the port is very limited. There's a city street that we use. Basically, the only access we have into our port. And sometimes trucks get backed up there and it causes problems.
Yes.
What recommendations would you might have to solve that problem?
A lot of ports, the bigger ports, Virginia Port Authority, Long Beach, Houston was looking at the same solution, are looking at timed entry that the truck driver, especially with today's Waze mapping, different apps, for example, they can time their entry. They know they can be in a certain queue. If there is the fact that you never know, things aren't perfect right now, you should report exactly the minute you're supposed to, that you'd have to create, there is some off-site warehouse space, but somehow with some of that land, just create an off-site parking space, if you will. Truck parking is the number one issue in the country for moving freight, right? And it's going to keep growing here. The neat thing, by the way, about the District D2 truck parking study was that you find it interesting is that it not only talked about supply, but it also talked, and there's the statewide one that addressed it by region, but the D2 truck parking study also has a demand model within it to look at projections, to look at what this demand is in the future. So the idea was, is it going to be something that could be solved? Is it what that deficit, if you know coming about? What I find personally interesting is that a lot of communities have taken the negative approach, if I call it, in urban planning to truck parking in this case. When I drive down the 95 corridor, some of those on-ramps from rest areas have the no parking sign every 25 feet, is a little bit excessive, right? But what I'm getting at in contrast is that if you help give the truckers solutions, for example, the T-Pass program, they're not actually using it a whole lot. A lot of the truck drivers are using their mobile apps and they're using their communication, if you will. They're using Trucker Path on their phones to find out about available truck parking. That's the information that needs to get out there, the cloud, if you will.
See, that's our biggest problem. We don't have any place to keep trucks anywhere on the island, even off the island right now. That maybe could be developed in the future. Another thing now, you understand this is we're working off ARPA funds to fund this position right now.
Yes.
And we have limited funds.
Yes.
And for a limited time. And this job entails you to be able to support yourself after those funds run out. So you've got to be able to create income for the Port Authority, not the port operator, but the Port Authority, so we can continue to keep you on as an executive director. We don't have any benefits. Are you aware of that? And would that hinder you from taking the job?
I was not aware of the benefits. It does not hinder me, to answer the first one, the B part. Relative to ARPA, yes, I was aware of it. I do, as I mentioned originally a minute ago, that I like urban planning. I chose it to help communities, to help. So my focus is not, I guess you'd say, me anymore. If that makes any sense. I've been there in terms of having that focus on me, having worked in the DC market, and I've kind of discovered it's not necessarily me. If that makes any sense. It's not who I am. In contrast to making a difference in the community and seeing people that understand the benefits to it. I tend to find that leads to, I should say, more drive. It creates more drive in somebody to go out and hustle.
Any other questions from anybody? Yeah.
Where do you live? Where are you located?
I'm in the Jacksonville
You're in
area.
Jackson, okay. I know it was mentioned earlier, but I just didn't hear.
Yeah. Let me check.
That was my biggest thing, what Danny said, is the money. You know, the position we want to start and we want to grow with.
Yep.
But and of course, we need your help to grow.
Right. You're right.
Mike, can you hear me? Mike, can you hear me?
Mike, can you hear me?
What are you asking me?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I've heard all the conversations.
Do you have any questions?
No questions.
Thank you. Stand by. This is weird. All right. Noel, thank you for coming today and in your presentation. We're going to hear from the other candidate now, and we're going to probably make a decision. If for some reason you don't get chosen, we still have to negotiate a contract. And if the person we choose, we can't negotiate the contract with and with acceptable terms, we may be turning back to the other candidate. So don't get discouraged if you're not chosen, or if you are, we'll sit down and negotiate. Our attorney will negotiate a contract with you. So if you would, thank you very much again for being here and answering our questions. And if you'd wait outside and ask David to come back in, we'll get started with him. Try to end this tonight and see if we can make some decisions.
Thank you for the opportunity tonight. When he's done, do you mind, so I want to stay for the whole meeting, do you mind letting me know that he's done afterwards?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
We're probably gonna let you know our decision if we make a decision tonight.
Right.
And I'm hoping we can, because we need to get this done.
I didn't know, just last week, I didn't know if, you know, my resume, I do have, as we call it in the consulting world, contracting world, a project-based resume.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want that. It's a little different type of format, but also references. If you want me to canvas over to it down.
We've got them all. All right. Yeah, I've got a list of references here.
Okay. I think I added one to it after the fact.
Okay, well, we can get that too if you think we need it.
Yeah.
All right.
Give it to Rosanna or give it to her afterwards?
Yeah, afterward. Let's wait till, because I'm sure we're not going to look at any other further references right now. I mean, we've got a lot and we want to. So
Thank you.
you can just wait outside for it. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Salary requirements?
No. Well, that's what we've got to negotiate. That would be.
I'm saying before we accept either or, would it be a good step to get some kind of requirements?
I'm gonna let you answer that question.
I mean, it's your collective decision, but you can select who you want to negotiate with, and then we can have those discussions afterwards.
But, okay, I'm with you on that, but the problem, again, is sometimes people get their ass hurt. It's used upon when you select one and you come back door later. So if you have a negotiating premise of where both guys
I
are
mean,
at.
you're welcome to ask them. I don't
But I didn't know.
think you all have a number, as far as I understand.
Right, right, but I thought I didn't know they were gonna put it out there, what they're looking for requirements.
No.
I think we could ask if they have a salary requirement.
Yeah, we can ask. It's no problem. Well, let's do David and then we'll bring him back in and ask him that one
Okay.
question.
Before we start.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Because it's one way up here and one way down.
Gotcha. Hey, David. Good to see you. All right. You're welcome to begin.
Sure. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. It's certainly an honor to be standing here before you tonight, being considered for this position. It's one that to the future of Port Fernandina and Highway Port, but as we have spoken many times about economic development opportunities throughout the county, we'll be able to focus on those efforts as well. I believe that the vast majority of my employment history has geared towards this type of position. Enjoyed a very long career in the port industry and touched all aspects of port environment. And so I'm ready to get started with little or no learning curve. There's a lot of work to be done, but it's an exciting opportunity. And I look forward to working with each of you on both individually and collectively to make sure that the goals of both are met and the community's goals and objectives are met as well. Being in the port environment is different than a lot of other businesses. Our commercial business is a part of public entity, and being able to understand each of those environments and walk those lines takes some skill and some experience. Understanding that confidentiality and transparency are not always at odds with one another. But there are things that, just by the very nature of the business, need to remain and kept in a confidential way. And there are things that nature being a public entity has to be very transparent about. And so being able to balance that and walk that line is critical. This is a very competitive environment that we're finding ourselves in. The port environment is unlike other governmental entities in that we're competition. The public works department of the city has its own defined market, provides a service. This is different. You're competing for business every day, and we're trying to attract those shippers and carriers who really don't care about three things: people, better, faster. And we've got to be able to provide an environment where Chris and his team can be successful in attracting them, but also be able to do it in a way that benefits the community and the community understands the objectives of the port and what we're trying to achieve. So I'm very excited about that opportunity. Throughout my career, opportunities to work with very large projects that were more countywide in nature. So I served as our representative on the whole 39 Host Committee and worked in the traffic cruise industry in Jacksonville for others. But I've been able to partner also on economic development efforts that either directly would impact the port, hopefully by bringing in some cargo that needs to go through Port Fernandina, but also just creates good jobs and economic opportunity for Nassau County. So I look forward to those challenges as well. I can go on. This is my love. I spent most of my professional career in this industry and build great relationships at local, state, federal level, and understand that there's a lot of investment to get the port where it is. And that investment was made by the residents, by the terminal operators, by the local government, by state government, federal government. Each one of those expects a return on their dollars. They may measure the return differently. Some measure from economic impact, from jobs, and income. Other measure from the return on investment. So being cognizant of each of those audiences and what they're expecting from us as a public entity, as the port, is important. And I look forward to having those conversations with each of those entities. And like I said, develop great relationships with our governmental partners and others to help us get there. So happy to answer any questions on that.
Tell us briefly about your job with Jacksonville Port Authority.
So I spent 25 years there, and I started as the manager of marine planning. And at that time, the Port Authority was bilingual, so we ran both the Air Force and the Sea Force. And We had a planning department that had director of planning, and then had a marine planner myself, and had an aviation planner, but we kind of all runs a lot anyway. But I was responsible mostly for developing capital improvement plans, comprehensive planning element for the city, and worked on some of the larger BRIs that the board was working on at the time, one for Glen Island, Tampa Point, and another one for the California area. Over the years, my responsibilities grew, as did my responsibilities. So I grew from manager marine planning up through senior director role. And so in addition to my stable base of managing the real estate asset for planning and environmental programs, I also took on responsibility for government affairs and a lot of contract negotiation and such projects. And then was charged with attracting the food industry in Jacksonville and maintain that as a business development role that I continue to play throughout my career.
Very good. You know, you've attended a lot of our meetings, most of them in the last couple of years. So you know all our issues. You know that you're not going to be just answering to our port operator. You'll be our employee. You'll be answering to us. And we're working off ARPA funds, you know that. And we're limited on those funds and a limited time frame. And one of your jobs will be to provide funding to keep you on past this date we're looking at, having to look at. How would you accomplish that to be able to find income for the Port Authority, because we're the ones paying your salary, to keep you on as executive director?
Good question. And I want you all to know that I understand very clearly who I will be working for. What y'all's goals and objectives are. I'm also clear on how this is being funded and taking this on as an opportunity to grow this as a long-term permanent position. I think open needs a long-term permanent port director, deserves a long-term permanent port director, and so we've got to figure out how to get there. And it will probably be a combination of that, right? Looking at, and I've spoken with a few of you over the last year about some of the concepts of, looking at the tariff, for example, and some additional charges that would come directly to OPA, the doctor, that other ports do charge, and I don't think it would create a competitive issue. As we know, in the operating agreement, there are other revenue opportunities that are not covered by the operating agreement. We certainly look for expanding at the port itself. And understanding how that operating agreement works, and when OPA really begins to share in revenues that are generated at the port, and how to manage that as quickly as possible. And then clearly looking at it from a county-wide development opportunity, whether it be conduit financing on some of the economic development projects, working with the towns and cities on some of the infrastructure they may need, and being able to serve as a conduit finance for those projects. And then looking at all of that, if there are inland development opportunities, part of our open is pretty broad.
Yeah.
So I think sitting down together with you guys and charting a quick forward and understanding you guys know the community better than I do. Yes, I've been here for a couple of years, and I've been watching this community for many years. But you guys know what's going on, out in your districts, and trying to identify those opportunities where we can be a benefit to the community and leverage what we can provide either to the city or downtown or other entity, hopefully from associated with it.
Questions?
Now, David, you've been here for like a couple of years. you know, the ordinance. Now, this year, we've got 3 board ordinances for election. We might not win the election. There might be 3 new boards here next year. That would take hard to work. I'm sure all of our opponents different ideas than what we have.
Yeah, and again, you know, I'm very good at the local commission. I have over 25 years served many different board members, many different board directors. And each one came with their own ideas and directions and thoughts, and develop those relationships and ability to work together and identify what's important and move forward together as a team. And so that's just the nature of the business.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about any particular issues at the port and how you would, I mean, you see what the issues are, you see the traffic issue, you got the grant issues. What solution would you prioritize?
Number one is get that.
Yes.
That really, if it's done well, done right, and I'm very confident will really chart a path forward. As you may know, my goal on that team really is a strategic advisor to both RJ and John Martin to make sure that at the end of the day, the plan is realistic, that it is implementable, and that the goals are achievable. And so I'm very confident that we're charting that path forward. I think a lot of the issues that the work that the community has dealt with over many years really stems largely from communication, and it's a lot there. And so that's really what's needed. And I tend to spend a lot of my initial days reaching out to the neighborhood, reaching out to the city and county, and we've already begun doing that as part of the master plan, but much more needs to be done in a more official capacity. And so that there's a viewpoint understanding of what the board is trying to do from a business perspective and understanding what the community's concerns are and trying to resolve those problems. But as I said in my letter, none of this happened overnight. It's not going to resolve overnight, but steady, consistent progress and building trust with business partners, with the community, is really going to make the rest of the plan move forward. 100% on that trust.
How would you solve our trucking problem? That's a loaded question, I know, but
it is. The trucks are a natural element of port development. The cargo's got to get here, it's got to leave here, and you're on left with rail. And the rail is well used. But not everything can move by rail. And rail has its own external effects as well. So it's really a matter of making sure that the terminal itself is operating efficiently as it can, so that the cargo moves as seamlessly as possible. We have talked, and I don't want to go into detail because we haven't really gotten to that point yet in the master plan. But transportation is for development, and we're looking at some option to try to make some improvements.
truck queuing, one of the problems we have. What do you think?
Part of that is, again, it's a logistics chain. So it's when the trucks arrive, how quickly the process through the gate, is how quickly they're able to either discharge the cargo or get their cargo loaded and get back out. Right? So it's, you really got to understand that whole supply chain, and working with Chris and his team to see if there are bottlenecks or constraints that he's having to deal with that really are not within his control, that are either within over control or within the kind of control that we can work with. Also sitting down with our part of the DOT Freight movement throughout the state, throughout the country is a major subject for everyone. And over my years at Jacksburg, I had to of course work with DOT very closely to resolve some very serious traffic transportation issues in Jacksonville. We had, much like your, our town on I got the trucks had literally loaded food in the school zone. You get it on 8th Street right away out the I-95. And we were able, through our effort with the DOT and our federal representatives, to get that project as well as 21st Street prioritized. And we were able to build new interchanges that allow trucks to move more efficiently. A lot of the road systems weren't designed for these big trucks. The street grid for Indiana was still designed 100 years ago. And now you're providing tractor trailer bus. So understanding that, looking with DOT on design standards, one of the things that make that traffic flow more easily to make it more opportunity.
Have you thought about maybe talking to Westbrook and see if there's some way we could use their property? I know they have a big piece of property over there that we could maybe queue trucks in.
Absolutely. And I think, Westbrook is more than just somebody that we can use. It's somebody that we ought to be partnering with because I think they can use us. Right? And so I think there is some mutual gain there potentially to drive additional cargoes, additional volumes, and better utilization of their own assets that they have there. So yes, I think there's no entity in this town that we could not be approaching and talking to and dealing with. The best cargo you can have is one that's captive. The discretionary cargo that can go to Brunswick or Jacksonville is really hard for small pallet turning. But cargo that's here, stuff we ought to. And I know Chris is doing a great job now to do those customers. But it's not within Chris's purview to be able to look at their property and say, can we do that? That's our job.
You wouldn't have any problem working with Chris?
No. You may have a lot of work with it.
David.
You're currently a subcontractor to RSNH. I know, so how would that work? Because we're already paying you to do that.
Right. So as we discussed, if I'm so fortunate, depending on my start date, I would stop billing as part of the RSNH contract. So you're going to pay me my salary as an open employee. But one of my primary responsibilities would be making sure that the RSNH master plan gets completed and
Working for us, you could still do that. I mean, that would be part of your job.
Part of my contract. Absolutely.
And RSNH would refund that money to council or how?
That would be something that they just wouldn't bill it. Would either be reallocated to another task, maybe that's interest in expanding maybe some additional outreach, maybe those funds to be used for that. I don't suspect, frankly, Commissioner, that there's going to be a lot of money there.
Yeah.
But,
so, yeah, I guess my biggest question or concern is obviously, if within a permanent fit, we want to work with you to develop this position as a permanent fit. So my thoughts on this are, obviously there's no money right now for benefits, but also we're limited on what we can offer. So, my question is more related to what your requirements are for salary. I mean, obviously that can be expanded as we grow, but now we need, my mind, as a small business owner, it's always the numbers.
So I don't want to avoid your question, but I also don't want to negotiate the agreement.
Well,
but I will say, that I'm well aware of the funding source. I'm well aware of the funding challenges that will happen. And I am extremely confident that we can arrive at a number that is fair compensation for this position and is within
That's my, I hate to offer a job to somebody that just the money.
I understand. And I don't want to take it out.
That's part of the negotiation process. Anyone else? Mike, do you have any questions?
No, I've looked at both resumes, and the questions that I've had have been answered. So, with their comments.
Hang on. All right. Any further questions of David? Okay, David, if you'll just wait outside for a few minutes.
Well, thank you so much for your time and consideration.
Would you ask
No.
Noel to come back in for just a minute? And then we'll.
By himself.
Yeah, by himself.
Yeah, cool. That's something with that kind of photo.
Oh, no.
That's my thought. So if somebody has that kind of budget over their head, there's always,
No.
I agree. What do you think?
One question we asked David, and we want to make sure we ask you the same question. I'll let Commissioner Hannah.
So my question was, my concern is obviously with the position and the way our funding. We've gotten some feedback before about this position and what, nationally, the position itself is rated for, what people are out there making. So in retrospect to what the national average is, do you have in your mind a monetary, what your thoughts are in the position is? Because obviously we want to grow with who we choose and obviously offer more money as we are capable. But right now we are very limited to what we can offer. And I would hate to offer a position to somebody that, I don't want to insult somebody. They have a mindset of where they're at and what they deserve, which is what they deserve in my mind, because that's what they know. Right. But if your mindset is way above where we're at, then it's just it's a roadblock, that's all.
I understand, it's a non-starter.
Yeah, it's just a hard thing.
I guess, and I tend to be a flexible person, it's 125 as a guess.
Okay.
As an annual number.
Okay.
No,
That puts us where we need to be, my friend. That's all.
Okay. Okay, if you'll go back out, we'll
do some.
Take some action and call you guys back in.
All right, thank you, John.
Thank you.
Get into any discussion we may need. Vote on one tonight, so we can get into contract negotiations and move forward quickly. And hopefully vote on the contract that Patrick will negotiate with this person by next meeting, first meeting.
Second question, obviously, we're hearing numbers.
Yes.
We're nowhere near that 125, right?
Possible.
I thought we were in the 60, 70 range.
Oh, no, you're not going to find anything in that range. Pierre, you want to comment on that question? Or not?
Well, I mean, obviously, this job is fundable by the grant. So.
And we have 4 years.
till till December 2024.
So the salary we offer, we can request back from the state.
Oh, yeah, that is, because he'd be our salary employee.
Yeah, you'd be an employee. So it's reimbursable under the grant.
And then he doesn't bring some income, and
Right.
they know that, they both know that. So I'm gonna ask, Mike cannot vote because he's not here, but I'm gonna ask for his opinion about the candidates. Mike, did you hear that?
I'm hearing you. I didn't know that I could not vote, but go ahead.
Yeah, you're not allowed to vote, that's state law. But we can ask you for your opinion on the candidates, I guess that's right. Okay? For your thoughts?
Yeah, I did not hear Patrick.
Say again? Mike, can you hear me?
I can hear you, but I did not hear Patrick.
You don't need to hear Patrick. He didn't say anything. What we're gonna do is just ask you for your opinion on the candidates, what your thoughts are.
Okay, again, I have, looked at their resumes. The questions that I have were answered by both of them. I would like to see us move forward with David.
Okay. Just hang on. All right. What's your pleasure, Commissioner? Further thoughts? I'm going to make a motion. I can't make a motion.
We've got two very qualified people. Yeah. One of them we know very well. Another one is. And like you said, the money is there for perfection. Perfection can help with it. But like I told him, there might be three of us leaving this board, so good, they need to work. We've done it to, myself, I like to make the motion to hire David Kaufman.
Motion been made to hire David Kaufman. Go here a second. All right, any further discussion?
Do you want to talk about the salary at all?
No, because if you're saying that the money is there, once we negotiate with David, once we get a feel for his mindset, as long as we're in that range, so I'm okay with it. I just don't want to offer somebody a job that's going to last us because we can only afford $125,000.
Well, any contract would have to come back before this.
Yes,
What you're essentially making a motion for is to enter into negotiations with Mr. Kaufman.
Right.
And then any contract would have to come back.
I think, I mean, I would say everybody should have best opinions. I think David's well qualified. I think David has more personal interest in this board. He's been here for a long time, coming to the meetings. I think he as a human being knows where we're at and what we're trying to accomplish. So I think David has the better, in my mind, the better, our objective more in his head. Or he already knows what we need. So I think the other guy is super qualified. I'm not saying anything about that.
Yeah, but I got a great resume.
Man, David.
Also, David has served with each other for different commissions.
Any other thoughts?
I just don't know why we would pay him since we're trying to be for.
Yeah, well, he's gonna do a lot more work for us, believe me.
I appreciate that he's done a lot of the back work of coming to the meetings and that he's, invested that goodwill in coming. I think the other candidate is really well qualified, and I think there's benefits to having someone who's fresh because they might bring new ideas. and a fresh perspective. It's about, always a tough choice.
All right, with that having been said, I agree with everything that's been said, and I too feel like David was the best executive director for us. I mean, this is something we've been working on for years since I've been on this board, trying to figure out a way. We have an opportunity now to get it done for at least a few years. And hopefully, from here on out, we can produce some revenue.
The term ultimately of the contract, that's something that you can negotiate through?
Yes. Yes, Patrick knows all about that, and he'll get it done for us. And we'll come back next meeting and.
We'll try, it'll be dependent on,
Of course.
not just me.
Of course.
Yeah, does the port operator have?
Rich, you got any comments?
The only comment I would have is a very positive feeling for David, and we've already known and have a good working relationship. So I would be okay.
All right, with everything being said, all in favor of hiring David Kaufman or negotiating with David Kaufman for a contract to be our executive director, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Motion carried, unanimous vote. Yes, would you, Joanne, would you ask them to come in, please? While you're sitting there. Think of that.
Yeah, I'm looking over.
Chairman Floyd.
I gotta go home with it.
So that's a unanimous vote of 4.
Unanimous vote.
With Mike,
Did you hear that, Mike?
I'm good.
Okay.
with support from Mike.
Out there, it's on television out there.
I didn't think about that. Tell me if you both come up to the microphone. First of all, I want to thank both of you for applying for this position. You both have very impressive resumes, and we would not go wrong with either one. David, you've been here for quite a while. You know what our issues are. You've worked with the community already. You know how to deal with our community governments and people, and you know how we have to deal with them. You've worked with this board with our master plan, so we're very impressed. Noel, your resume is just outstanding. You know, anybody that would hire you it would be to their benefit. However, because David has spent so much time here doing what he does for us and with us, we just feel like right now he's going to be the better candidate for us.
Could agree more.
Okay. And but like I said, we're now going to go into contract negotiations with him, and if that somehow doesn't work out, the salary range you put out is very acceptable to us. If it comes to that, so stay tuned. If we can't do something with David, we will certainly turn back to you if you'll accept this.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. You can stay if you'd like. Or you can, whatever you need to do. So thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I want you to, Patrick will be working with you in the next couple of weeks. We hope to get a contract that we can ballot on or vote on next meeting, our first meeting in May. So we can get this done, because we need to get started. it's imperative that we do this, and we look forward to working with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
10-minute break.
Wow. Yeah, yeah. You know, I think they're gonna tear it down.
What?
Yeah, I'm sure. I hear they're gonna build a hotel.
You mean they rented the space?
All right, let's come back to order, please.
You know, that's,
All right,
that's like the soul.
it's already 8 o'clock. We need to move on quickly, so we're gonna do that. And anything I can put off the next meeting, I'm going to. Let's start with the court attorney's report. There are some things on there we're not gonna deal with tonight, the bylaws, the public records request policy, and the board procedures. We can deal with those at the next meeting if we need to. If you want to say anything about any of those.
I think for now, I'll bring the updated public records request policy to the next meeting. The other two documents are fine. The only comment I got on board procedures, given the recordings and what Rosanna does, is to confirm the result of the vote on the record a little bit more clear than it has been.
Yeah. I think I did that.
You did. You did. So we'll just bring the public records policy update next meeting. For the security services RFP, I still don't have any details on the actual security services that are needed. You know, I don't want to guess at that. I can be very general. We can see what we get, but I'd like to have some feedback.
Yeah, Ray and I will get you some feedback.
Okay.
Good. Can you do that quickly, Chris?
Yep, yep.
All right.
The document request that we submitted to National Terminals and got a response 4:50 this afternoon from their attorney, so I'll review that and talk about that next time, but I do have it.
And I just wanted to say that I think, obviously Patrick will tell us, but we tried to be fully transparent and comply completely with the request, both in time and substance. What was it?
I did notice it's over
206
pages.
206 pages. Well, it's just, copies of documents.
Yeah. All right.
Answer your question.
We'll let him review that and we'll talk about it next meeting. So that goes on the agenda next meeting. Rosanna. All right. Anything else, Patrick? Any questions for Patrick? All right, let's move on to Fort Account report. Your budget report?
No, do that at the first meeting of the month. So for the month end, so we'll have the treasurer report at the next meeting.
Right,
So
exactly.
I wasn't sure what you wanted to discuss there. Obviously, you saw we requested for our cash flow planning. And Rosanna's put up on the screen, so we requested just to understand the cash flow requirements for the master plan, and just so we can plan out and make sure we have the funds available. And so we received that from our estimates, so just to help us plan it, so we can make sure we have the money to pay those invoices going forward. So
Yeah, they did submit the invoices and we're at a monthly amount that I think we can deal with and can get reimbursed for after we pay it and all that we go through. I don't think it's not an amount each month that we can't deal with. So I appreciate Ronald Smith and Harold getting that to us. And I talked to Justin today and they will be setting up some meetings and a public meeting where the public will be invited and offered a chance to give input. So that's upcoming soon.
Are there dates on that?
No, he hasn't got any dates yet, but he's working on that and he'll get to us very soon. Is that all you got?
that's it.
All right. Any update on the other future ARPA reimbursements? You got anything prepared yet?
No, so I'm supposed to have the reimbursement ready for Friday, but we're behind. So for January, February, March, wages. So hopefully that'll be done by the end of this week.
Very good.
Ready for your signature.
I have a question about the CPMP remaining balance. There are two, we paid $367 recently.
So yeah,
Somewhere in that range.
yeah.
And we have two invoices left. What are we waiting for?
So just like the previous invoices, we're waiting for reimbursement. So obviously we send the payment. So the funds come from Worldwide Terminals we send them to ZPMC. Worldwide Terminal submits that for grant reimbursement from the state of Florida. Once we receive the grant reimbursement, we submit it back to Worldwide Terminals, and they start the process on.
And that's what we're waiting on, the grant reimbursement.
So obviously, yeah, so the grant reimbursement arrived, so the grant reimbursement from the state for the 376. So that was a grant reimbursement that had been submitted. I'd have to look back, but maybe 5-6 weeks ago, we got the funds. Once we got the funds, within 3 days, ZPMC had their payment. So, but obviously funds come in from Florida. So again, as soon as we get the next reimbursement, we'll pay the next invoice.
Very good. All right, any questions for Pierre? All right, let's move on. Port operator report. We've got several things on here. We're going to talk about the fabric warehouse for one. Chris?
Yeah, I do have.
Where are we at there?
Input on the request for bids. It looked fine, and I appreciate the fact that, had provided the proper legal language and that sort of thing. And I think the specifications are very thorough in what we're looking for. Really, just the dates and the timing. As we all know, it's a project of urgent time frame, and we've had some drift on it. But in any case, we know the potential contractors, providers, manufacturers that are out there. There's a handful of them that they watch for these projects. So we think we're going to get a very quick response from the limited field that can meet the spec. And I noticed that Patrick put in as a placeholder May 30th to be submitted, which, I mean, that's beyond 30 today. And I just think it's far longer than necessary. I wanted to ask, how does it get advertised, and what day, if we agree on language tonight, what day would it get posted? Approximately.
On the website, could be tomorrow.
And do we have to post it anywhere else, or that's the posting?
So we don't have to, but if you want to get a wider circulation in our website, that's what we've done in the past.
Mm-hmm.
And the May 30th wasn't, I don't care what the day is.
Okay,
I didn't know we were going to vote on this tonight. I thought we were going to vote on it today, so I was pushing days, but
yeah,
it's really the will of the board just at the time.
Yeah. Well, I think since the rest of the language is fine, I just wanted to propose a time frame. If the board could make a decision tonight, then we could at least get it posted.
And when do you want?
Well, I was hoping we could get the returns back in time for the May 11th meeting, so you could make a selection. And then you still need the May 25th meeting to finalize the contract. So best case scenario, if we cut it down, and then if we did a May 11th submission, it's well, that's the day of the meeting. So either May 9th or May 10th, which is either 12 or 13 days from Friday.
That's not a lot of time.
When do you have to have the packet finalized for the May 11th meeting?
The packet finalized 2 days before.
So May 9th, the packet has to be finalized.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have May 6th. So that's like barely.
Right. Yeah. I mean, 2 weeks, I think, would be plenty. We could even make it May 14th, and then we can do questions by May 5th or 6th, respond by May 9th. Then we're already pushing up against the second meeting in May, but perhaps by then we'll be able to have a look at it and then make a decision at the May meeting. It's the second.
Wow, what's the urgency?
Well, you see what we've had to do in the meantime.
But you got that tent there now to store that stuff in, so I wouldn't see the urgency in getting the bid back and starting the fabric warehouse right away.
Well,
because you've got time now on that tent.
The tent is 15,000 square feet. This building is 50,000.
Understanding.
It's a big difference in the amount of space.
But how much space do you need to unload the rest of that ship?
We'll get the Lucky Hong out with the tent, and then we were planning on this was only the tent and waiting for the fabric building. So maybe it's indicated that there's a couple of months play time with that tent, but the point is there's no reason to delay. At least getting the advertisement posted.
Are you renting the tent? Or do you own it?
No, it's a rental. It's curbing tents. You can rent them for weddings. We're thinking of having an OPA / worldwide party under there.
Actually, I think they did it for the golf festival.
Yeah, I think they provide the tents for the concourse.
I just had a question about the specs because I asked Patrick and he just said he was just provided the specs, but they're very specific. And I just wondered why, like how you came up with the specs for the project.
Well, they're basically for a fabric building similar to the one that we have already. And we've now proven that that building is permissible, permittable by the city of Fernandina. It meets the Florida code, it meets all these requirements, but it's still generic. It's still a fabric building, steel frames, removable, you know.
You have a problem with that?
No, my question was just why they're so specific because they almost seem to be designed to only be met by one specific manufacturer.
Well, that's not true. In fact, it's really the same spec that we used when we got that original manufacturer. So then the same spec we used the last time we went out for bid.
Basically looking for 50,000 square foot building plate.
Right, but you know, you need, there's guaranteed provisions in here, there's wind provision for our building code.
But it doesn't say that it needs to be materially the same or sufficient or basically as sturdy as the specs. It said it has to be specs. So that's just why I asked, because you could build a warehouse, you know, if it's very specific. And so I'm just wondering, did they not provide these specs?
No, absolutely not. As I said, these specs were the specs we used when we originally solicited, and bid top happened to win that process. Look, you can say these specs are equivalent. You know,
Also,
I mean, specs are specs, they're specific.
this here, when you work with some of these companies that have buildings, information, you can run that spec it down a lot easier. You need to get the windows and all that other stuff, you know, and the size of the material.
My concern is that the bid process is supposed to allow us to get the best deal for the public money. This is public money, right? Is it gonna be a grant that funds it?
Yeah, 50-50 grant and.
So we just want to get the best deal for public money, and the whole purpose of bidding is that competitors would, you know, compete for our business. And it does work. It does actually result. It's.
I believe in the bidding process, right?
But if we're very specific, then that limits the field to the number.
Just put the words in or
Well, you have to
equivalent,
be specific.
but we have requirements.
You have to be specific
You have
about
very
what you want in the space and everything that goes along with it.
I mean,
And what will pass
There's
inspection.
a lot of.
right, things like galvanized bulbs, and a lot of this is building standards for the fabric building warehouse. It may look very specific to you, but as I said, the half a dozen or so people that are in this space would be able to meet these specs. So price is gonna be ending up driving it. The delivery time frame is tight. That may separate some competitors that have much bigger backlogs.
So I can add language to the interest generally or substantially.
Would be helpful, just because there might be minor deviations that might not be material.
Right, so what do we need to do?
You need to tell me the dates you want to plug into this, or if you approve it tonight, obviously we're there, and it's here on the website by tomorrow, certainly by Friday. And then I need to know when the due date is. If you tell me the due date, I can backfill the questions. So if you tell me when you want the proposals in the door via email, then I can go backwards on the calendar.
Our next, our second meeting in May is, it's the sixth.
25th.
25th.
So
25th, yeah,
we could do like
I'd say the 20th.
I was gonna say the 20th, that's Friday, everything turned in by then.
Okay.
And that gives us that week to go over it before the meeting.
Well, we get it out, we can open them on that Friday, get them delivered to everyone over the weekend.
Yeah,
Well, the email, we're just gonna ask for email.
Yeah, email's fine.
So she'll get them. If they're in substantial compliance, then we'll add them to the packet for the meeting on the 20th. That's what everybody.
Yeah.
That's the rule.
So 20th would be the due date?
Deadline, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we could live with that. Do you want to have questions? Do you think it's necessary?
I don't, we don't have that.
Yeah, I don't think you need it. It is in here and then paragraphs about any, I'm sorry, it's the middle, all questions should be directed, but there isn't, and then you say, answers will be published. Okay, so that's not a question day.
Right. All right, let's do that, the 20th, and then we'll open them on the 20th, or you'll send me emails out with the bids. And then we'll make a decision on the 25th.
Thank you.
All right, very good.
I just had a question about the purpose of the warehouse again. And we've never really received any sort of explanation as to the backlog of customers or what the long-term use would be outside of this one-off Lucky Hong.
The fabric building, if you recall, and you can look back, the genesis of the fabric building was late last year. The Lucky Hong was not part of it. The Lucky Hong was a one-off festival. Tent is what we needed to get the Lucky Hong finally finished because we had so many other demands on us. We just weren't able to put the resources in that festival. But the fabric building is because we have made a permanent entry into the plywood business. We have two multi-year contract with plywood customers, not the Lucky Hong. And also what we found with the fabric building that we have, we're in the forest products niche of the market. That means KLB, that means plywood, that means sawn timber or lumber, and that means wood pulp. So any one of these forest products can be used, can be stored in the fabric building. It gives you the covered, dry warehouse space at an extremely efficient price per square foot.
I'm glad you brought that up. So we don't have warehousing in the tariff currently. And if we are going into the warehouse business, I think it should be.
We're not in the
warehouse business. I don't understand that concept.
Will you be charging the owners of the property?
No. Wait, we have warehouses now. And we do the same thing we're gonna do with this warehouse.
And we discussed.
Why would it be in the tariff?
We discussed the last meeting, the charges for the first time I've ever heard charges related to warehousing discussed in our meeting, was last meeting. And so that's why I'm just revisiting that point. Because we are looking for other sources of revenue for OPA. And if we're going to take a large portion of our property, which was formerly for containers, and make a strategic shift into brick bulk and warehousing, I think we should have not only a use case, but some sustainable revenue for OPA long run. Because I know that as a business, you wouldn't go into warehousing unless you had revenue associated.
It drives the vessel revenue. It's about the more on-port storage space. We are now turning down break bulk vessels because we have no more available on-port storage space. That is the limitation of all your revenue, your tonnage, your usage fee, which is per ton, is going to be how much.
That's a different issue. I'm not gonna cover that right now. We need to move on from this and get the rest of this finished here.
It just seems like it's playing out a lot like the that we approved it, we went through the process, and then we fought about the revenues. We're still fighting about the revenues today, over a year later. And so I think we need to have a revenue sharing agreement in place. If there is revenue, there may not be revenue, but if there is revenue, I think that we should have a revenue sharing.
That's something we can look at. We've got something I'll get that report updates from our community at worldwideterminals.com.
That's Not my item, that's actually something Rosanna asked for at the last meeting, it was not
Yeah,
provided, and so.
We have no updates. The last update was an email from Tammy Kosak on April 12th, which everybody has seen. But since then, no further submissions to our community at Worldwide.
All right, I've got two issues I want to address here. Number one, I had a meeting with the Summers Isle staff or board, whatever they are, executives, last week, and I know Chris met with them also. Chris, I just want to enforce that Summers Isle is our longest customer. And I don't want them to have to wait because their people are upset. And you know this because you talk to them. They're upset because they can't get in on their certain days to load their vessel to load Summers Isle and get it to permit. We have to make sure that they do not miss their deadline. I mean, they're threatening to pull out of here. We can't lose that business after 50-something years.
I'm in complete agreement, Chairman Full.
So
we've redoubled our commitment. They will get their spots.
I don't want them to be left out.
They're not.
If you have to move the ship, move the ship. I don't care what it costs. I want Summers Isle at that wharf, loading on the day they're supposed to, they're scheduled to, and let them get out of it. I don't want any more problems with Summers Isle. Okay?
Yep.
There was a concern this week with the temporary tenting. I got a call, they were putting up a warehouse, and I should call her that it was not a warehouse, it was a tent. And I did find out though that the permit was not applied for, and I understand you didn't think that we needed a permit for a tent, but yes, we did. So there was some concern with the city that we didn't get the proper permitting. And I understand that, you know, our interlocal agreement says we need to do that when it's necessary. And we're going to follow the interlocal agreement. I spent too much time working on that and we'll get it passed. And I'm not going to allow any problems with the city to take hold. And what I'm trying to say is we're going to follow the guidelines of the interlocal agreement. So I went out there today. I heard from the building department and they were concerned. So we went out there today with Stan Harrington from the port. We met with Charles George, the city engineer, Jimmy Parr, the building department official, Kevin Singley, a building department official, and Jason Higginbotham, the fire chief, to look at the tent. The tent, they all agreed the tent was well done. There were no issues, no fire issues. Jason didn't have any problems with it. Stan said the permit that we needed was applied for, and Charles said that he would make sure that that got issued quickly and there would be no charge for the permit. So all that is taken care of. So if you get any concerns about that from the public, let them know that it's all been taken care of and we're on solid ground. I did talk to Jason Higginbotham, the fire chief. He does have a problem. And we've talked about this before. It's the fire suppression or fire protection in the warehouse. I think it's #1 warehouse that needs to be upgraded. And I know he said he's talked to you about it many times.
You may have talked to Dan about it.
Well, he talked to somebody about it. I thought he told me he talked to you.
We've been in compliance each and every year since I've been here, but if there's something that needs to be addressed,
He
we'll
said
take
it
a
needs
look
to
at it.
be replaced.
I don't know
And I
exactly
said, well,
what
that's
it
gonna
is.
take a grant to do that.
Yeah.
So if we need, let's find out what we need. Let's talk to him. If we need to apply for a grant, let's get it done. I don't want to have any problem, because he said if it's not done within a certain length of time, he's gonna shut that warehouse down, and he can do that. So let's get that done, Chris.
What's in that warehouse?
Right? Yes, sir.
We, about the 4 years I was on this board, we replaced both of the fire systems in the warehouse, all 3 warehouses. And they've gone out already, or? It's just
Apparently there's one that is
how
not up
often
to
you have them
code.
inspected?
Every year.
Every year, they pass the inspection?
Yes, sir.
I'll talk to Jason again and see.
Well,
which
this
one.
is the fire people intent permits. When the people start?
Anybody needs a tent permit.
All these tents that gonna be up here for strip up?
No,
they have a
no.
permit for all
Well,
that?
I'm not sure how they work that. They have to have some sort of permitting. They have to do a lot of things to be able to have a tent. But the car show has to get a tent permit, put up a tent, put their cars under for the show. So everybody has to do that.
I'm sure they do.
They do.
And I'm sure that I'm sure that Gucci just wasn't chosen out on Fort Worth.
Okay. Any questions for Chris?
So on that fire system, if we pass inspection every year, right? How come it wasn't brought up during?
I don't know. I didn't go into detail.
But I can tell you, this is the first I'm hearing, but I will look into it.
I'll get back to them if I have to go out with
You
you.
can come and see us, yeah, we've met with.
Okay. I'll get that taken care of. All right, let's move on. Unfinished business, Reynolds Smith master plan update. I talked to Justin today and I told you that they're gonna get started back up and start having meetings, and he'll give me a schedule of when that's gonna be. All right, Chris, there's one other thing, the FDOT grant GOLO 6 update. Do you have any update about the information you were trying to find out that Nick was trying to get from us? I don't know. We have looked everywhere. I don't know what kind of information we have that would help with that grant.
Well, it's all the prior invoices and the original agreement with Trans Systems and OPA, which we were not a party to. That was when Laura was here, but we did get a bunch of documents from Rosanna late this afternoon. We're looking at those, plus what we have, and because we've got to get these invoices resubmitted by Friday. And we had submitted them, they were rejected, so we're trying to fill out the things that were missing. Some we didn't have the things that we asked for, so. Well, Jeff should have had a complete file on this. I mean, he handled all of that in his era. I was hoping that it was turned over to Patrick.
Through all those files.
Right. And so now Rosanna seems to have found some things. And that's all she has, so we're gonna have to make do with it.
Right.
And if something is not available to us, we'll just have to explain that to FDOT and go from there.
I thought from the email it said that they were waiting on invoices.
Well, the fact is that we submitted invoices several months ago. And then we got a long detailed email some weeks after that rejecting the invoices and saying these additional things are needed. And we're talking about pages of stuff. And so going through all that, we pulled all the documents out that they have. Basically, FDOT needs to complete their file so that they can pay the final invoice. And apparently some of this stuff was missing in their file. Nowadays, they're very thorough. They get everything they need as you're going through the individual submission. But for whatever reason, there's some missing documents and so we're trying to find everything they've asked us to find. That's all we do.
Okay, any further comments? All right, let's move on. We don't have anything under new business. We haven't already covered. Other items to be brought before the board. Anyone got anything?
I just want to remind the board about the invitation for Miss Jenny Higginbotham.
Yeah.
I emailed, please RSVP by May 2nd. This is the only invitation OPA received.
Right, thank you. Anything else? I had an interesting phone call this week from Economic Development Board. Someone had inquired about property at the port that we own that they wanted to possibly buy from us. The address was 215 North Second Street. I said, I don't know if that's possible. That's for one of our warehouses. And we're not in the market to sell a warehouse. So he said, if somebody from out of town just looking for money to invest, property to invest in, and I said, well, they'll have to find something else because we're not selling that warehouse. I don't know if you're aware, there was a bill in Tallahassee that said something about us losing. It said the bill dissolves all independent special districts created by special act prior to the ratification of the Florida Constitution on November 5th, '68. This bill did not affect us in any way. I talked to court about it. He said the only places that affected were the 6 places that were listed in the bill. And they include Bradford County Development Authority, Sunshine Water Control District, Broward County, East Point Water and Sewer District, Franklin County, Hamilton County Development Authority, Hamilton County, Marion County Law Library, Marion County. And this is the big one, Reedy Creek Improvement District. Everybody knows what that is? That's Disney. So they were dissolving their charter for their county, the whole county, so they could. Well, you know all the story about that, so I'm not going to go into that. But we're not concerned with that. We're not covered in that. So there's nothing for us to worry about if anybody asks me anything. Okay. Any other things to be brought before the commission? Hearing none, this meeting is adjourned.